1 week season.
What is going on, OWS fam, YouTube fam? Welcome to the week 4 edition of the OWS Angles podcast, week 4. I am your host, I am your guest, I am JMToWin. As always, throw this baby on 1.5x speed or 2x speed, and let's get started with a fun week. 11 games on this main slate. We're getting to that point in the season. Bye weeks haven't started quite yet, but we've got international game this week, takes game off the main slate. We've got 2 Monday night games, takes an extra game off the main slate. So 11 games, and this is basically what we will be dealing with the rest of the season is 9 to 11 game slate up until pretty deep into the season when bye weeks end. And even then, we start to get some games on Saturdays and all that sort of weird stuff. And so, we're kind of past the big slates and down to a little bit more manageable 11-game slate this week. We've got some injuries piling up. We have some backfields turning over to new players, some backfields that aren't necessarily turning over to new players, but could be. We have more backup quarterbacks again this week. Got news this morning about Marcus Mariota starting again for the Commanders. And then we have some interesting games, right, where some good teams playing against each other, whether it's the Colts and Rams, who, Rams really probably should be 3-0 in their minds, and playing against this 3-0 Colts team that probably should be 2-1. They really pulled out that game against the Broncos that had a nice run out there down the stretch, but 2 good teams there. We've got 2 desperate teams in the Ravens and Chiefs going against each other. So what we are going to do on this show, as always, is try to avoid being redundant against other things that I've talked about this week. So if you are an OWS subscriber, you will get my player grid on, and actually we don't have the little banner up here. So on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're not an OWS subscriber, our week pass is $1 this week. So let me touch on that real quickly. Actually, we always try to open the door in different ways for people to use the site because, as I often say, OWS is not for everyone. But because of that, the people that it is for, it tends to be really for those people. And so we are not a conventional DFS site. Obviously, we have my player pool, we have Mike's player pool, we have Pappy's player pool, we have Sonic's MME pool. We even Hilo is really hitting on, even though it's very strategy focused, he's hitting on the plays that he likes. We have the game breakdown. So you have the stuff that you get at every other DFS site, but that's mostly to get people in the door because that's what people think they want, think they need. But how we really win in DFS is understanding the strategy, the game theory, the roster construction components. And so everything that we do in terms of talking about how we are, like what players we like, we're always talking about it in the context of how we're putting them onto rosters, what the strategy looks like, and how we can target first place in tournaments. And so because of that, there's some people who come to the site, it doesn't resonate with them, it's not what they're looking for, and they figure that out very quickly and move on. Other people, it is what they're looking for, and they are able to stick around. So if you have not used the site, or if you've used the site on a free week or a week pass or something in the past, but you don't have the bankroll, you don't play at a large enough bankroll to justify, a $229 DFS membership, which is what most DFS memberships are across the industry, $229 or more. And you're like, yeah, it'd be nice to have projections, ownership projections, all that, but I can't do that with my bankroll. Well, get in on a week pass, $1 week pass this week. There's no code, just go to the checkout, buy a week pass. It's $1 for this week only. Okay, so my player grid goes out on Friday evening. My journal goes out throughout the week for Inner Circle members on Discord, and then it all gets compiled into the scroll on Friday, so it's there now. And then Friday night, my Inner Circle, my journal Inner Circle members on Discord will get additional thoughts from me on Friday night, Saturday night. Also in the player grid on late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, my update goes in there, which is basically like who I'm playing, not how I'm playing them, but who I'm ultimately playing, because things change between a Friday player pool and actually building those rosters on Saturday night. So they don't typically change much, but that's what we get on Saturday night, Sunday morning. And then we have the Angles podcast in here. And so what we try to do is not hit on the same things that I'm hitting on in the other spots, but be able to talk more about the broad, big picture angles on the slate that I'm seeing and any specific things that I want to drill into. So if you watched me on my show with Pete Overzet this morning, you saw me drinking out of this mug. It might have looked like tea. It was actually bone broth that my wife told me I had to drink in order to get better. But my kid, actually only one of my kids, but my daughter has been sick the last week or so, and I have been very low on sleep because she's also been waking up in the night. So I'm starting to feel it. So if I'm a little bit slow on the thoughts today, bear with me because I'm certainly feeling a little bit of the sickness on my end. Okay, so this week, I am, speaking of not getting sleep and everything being a little bit weird, I am not playing MME this week. I'm focusing on single entry 3 max. My 6-year-old son is been into motorsports since he was 2 years old, and he has his first go-kart race on Saturday. It's an all-day thing. It's a night race, but apparently it's an all-day thing. We got to be there at 10 a.m. So this week, for those of you who don't know me, I live in Oregon. We don't have DraftKings in Oregon anymore. That means you can't reserve entries in the state of Oregon. You can still play on DraftKings if you reserve out of state. So every week on Tuesday, I fly to Oakland. I reserve my entries. I fly back home that same day, and that's sort of my work day on that day. So this week I did not reserve any MME rosters because I knew that extra time on Saturday night, I wouldn't really have the time to be spending it on MME builds. And so I'm single entry 3 max this week, and that's kind of, that shapes my thinking in a sense, right? So I want to throw that out there because I'll be a little bit more focused on tighter pool as opposed to also the guys that I would play in large field. As always, I'll continue to hit on the things that I would be doing in large field, but kind of getting a sense of how we're shaping our tighter pool. And taking a step back, just a reminder, like every week I play MME, but it's about 22% of my buy-in for the week, right? So still the vast majority of my money is in single entry 3 max. And that's where my focus is in terms of what are the best plays, right? And so this week it's just isolated only to that. And so working through that in terms of what this slate provides. And I'm going to start at the top where we have the Bills implied to score 31.75 points in a what's expected to be a blowout win at home against the Saints. And we have the Lions predicted, implied by Vegas, implied team totals, 27.25 points in their game against the Browns. Pretty high implied team total against this great Browns defense, but if anybody can get there, it is the Lions. So 2 teams with these really high totals. And I think that one of the questions that we have to ask is, are we interested in these teams? How do they score all these points without producing a tournament winner, but also recognizing tournament winner is what we want. We don't want good scores, right? So we know Josh Allen, going back to last year, he had 5 games last year over 25 DraftKings points, and 3 of those were back and forth shootouts. Another one of those, or 2 of those were back and forth shootouts, Lions and Ravens. One of those was a game where they were down to the Cardinals early in week 1 and had to come back. Another one was a game that they won, I think 35-10. And he threw for like 153 yards, but happened to throw for 4 touchdowns and put up a strong score, not a had to have it score. And then he had one random game where he had close to 300 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and ended up putting up, I think it was around 30 DraftKings points in a blowout win. So I illustrate all that. I say all that to illustrate that it's rare in this Joe Brady offense, in this era of how the Bills are playing, for Josh Allen to put up a tournament winner. It doesn't matter how soft the matchup is. It's the nature of how they call these games based on what their opponent is doing and how they want to win that specific game, right? The Bills are a chess match team. They're trying to figure out how to win that specific game, and it's unlikely that they're going to try to win this specific game through Josh Allen. And then on a team that spreads the ball around so broadly, to where last year there was, I believe, if I remember correctly, 0 tournament winners from Bills pass catchers in the regular season, all season long, in spite of Josh Allen putting up, 3 elite games and another couple really strong games. And so really the Bills passing attack is pretty easy to stay away from this week. Not to say that something can't hit there, but in terms of what makes us the most money over time, for me, that's a spot that's pretty easy to just stay away from. Now the run game is attractive. Obviously James Cook, still this offense is all about rotating. And, but James Cook is seeing a higher snap share than he saw last year. Not dramatically higher. He did get 66.7% last week, 40 out of 60 snaps. He was like 45% in their blowout win the week before. And then he had like 55 or something like that in week 1 against the Ravens. So sort of still in this lower end of usage. But, or I should say time on the field, but they're using him more when he's on the field. He topped 15 touches only 3 times last year. He's gone over 20 touches in every game so far this year. So it's almost like the Bills paid him and then they're like, okay, well, let's actually ride him a little bit more this season. So I think that he's very viable this week against the Saints. But other than that, there's nothing really on the Bills offense that I'm attracted to. And then we have the Lions, who, another team where they spread the ball around so they can have a big game, but it could come through somebody you're not anticipating it coming through. And then on top of that, their prices are high, and they're playing this Browns defense. So even if they get to this 27, 28 points that they're implied to score based on the over-under of this game and the spread of this game, even if they get there, do we get tournament winners? And are we left guessing on who's going to hit, just hoping to get a solid score? And so that's kind of how I'm seeing the Lions this week. If I were playing large field, I would have a little bit of exposure to Jared Goff stacks, because Jared Goff, if they can hold up the Browns pass rush, Jared Goff can do well in this spot against a heavy man coverage team. Amon-Ra St. Brown would be the stacking partner there. And it would probably require the Browns to be doing something on offense in order for that to hit. So maybe bring that back with David Njoku or something like that. But I do think that Goff is viable in large field play. But another offense that I'm actually fine, in spite of this huge team total, I'm fine leaving it alone in single entry 3 max. And that's the reason why. Again, tough matchup, high price tags. There probably will be 1 or 2 solid scores from the Lions, but probably not scores you had to have in order to win a tournament. And so then you're just taking on guesswork, unnecessary guesswork, in order to get a solid score with a lower probability of guessing right on that, as opposed to just saying, let's go to the places where there's higher confidence, right? You go to the Rams and like all of their passes are going to Puka. I think it's over 75% are going to Puka and Devontae Adams. You've got Kyren Williams getting, not as big of a share of the backfield work as we could get from him in the past, but still a pretty large share of the backfield work from Kyren Williams. And so there's a lot less guesswork. If the Rams have a big game, we can have a pretty good sense of who's going to benefit from that. Whereas the Lions, that's not always the case. And then again, it's not clear that they're going to have a big game in this spot this week. Okay, so next we have kind of this next class of teams, and just going by Vegas implied team total. So we've got the Rams implied to score 26. We have the Ravens implied to score 25.5. And we have the 49ers at 25 and Chargers at 25. So we're going to talk about these games from the bottom to the top in the order I just listed them. So the Chargers and the Giants. So there's a lot going on with this Chargers team. They are top of the NFL in pass rate over expectation, not something we typically see from a Greg Roman offense, from a Harbaugh offense, but we're 3 weeks in, and so this isn't completely sticky yet, but it's starting to get a bit sticky. We also have Amarian Hampton stepping into a lead back role in this spot, and then I think this is important. We should have a possibility for the Giants to have some fresh energy in this game. So if you followed Russell Wilson's career since he left Seattle, he hasn't really been a beloved member of any of these locker rooms he's been in since then. So if you don't know a lot about Russell Wilson, he talks in a lot of quotes and in a lot of positive affirmations, and he's got his whole entourage that's there in the building with him, helping him with different things. When he was with the Broncos, he wanted his own office in the building. And so he wasn't with the rest of the team. He was in this office all the time. And it's just, there's kind of this aspect of being a teammate of Russell Wilson's that's never gotten people to really vibe with him in the way that they did with Seattle, because with Seattle, he came in as the young guy. He was whatever it was, 3rd round pick, beat out Matt Flynn for that starting job. He had kind of some veterans around him. He had that great defense. And it was like, oh man, we've got this cheap rookie quarterback, or this cheap young quarterback, on this rookie contract, and we're building around him with weapons on offense, with a great run game, with a great defense, and he wasn't that guy yet, right? And so he was able to be like, yeah, he's a little quirky, he's a little corny, but he was their guy, right? And as he's left and supposed to be the guy in other spots, it hasn't quite clicked. And so I say that to say, with the Giants, we don't just have Russell Wilson leaving the starting lineup where, he can't throw underneath throws. He can't march the field. He can't be surgical. He has to throw the ball downfield in order to do anything. That's his game. And now you got Jackson Dart, who should be a little bit better at marching the field. You have Cam Scatterbo coming in, who's got all this energy and excitement to his game and the way he plays. And I could see there being a different energy to this Giants offense this week. So horrible matchup for them against the Chargers. But my point is they have potential to keep it competitive. The roughest part of the Giants is their offensive line. Andrew Thomas is back. He was kind of on a pitch count last week. Should be off that this week. Khalil Mack's out for the Chargers. The Chargers have this great defense, but it's not because they have this great pass rush. It's because the back end is so well designed and works so well together that it's just difficult for quarterbacks to figure things out against this defense, to move the field against this defense. But it's not a spot where we expect, even with the Giants' bad offensive line, it's not a spot where we expect Jackson Dart to be under duress the whole game. And I do think that the Giants can do well here. And I don't mean that I'm looking to play Jackson Dart in DFS, but what I mean is they can keep this game competitive enough that we have an opportunity here for the Chargers to be somewhat aggressive deep into this game. And so I think you can go Herbert here. I think you can go with the Chargers pass catchers here. I think you can go with Amari and Hampton here. So plenty to like in this spot. And I don't mind mixing and matching pieces from the Chargers across my single entry 3 max this week. Next up, Jags and 49ers. So what we've seen from the Jags offense, it hasn't been good. And obviously a lot of trust in Liam Cohen, the way he designs things, how he attacks defenses, that stuff is all good. We know that they have pieces on this offense, but Trevor Lawrence has just not looked right in this offense. Low completion rate, low rate of on-target throws. He's missing some reads, but more importantly, he's just missing throws. And it's not always, I was saying this on Pete's show earlier, that in the NFL, it's usually tight windows in zone or it's sticky man coverage. And so ball placement is hugely important. A guy is rarely just open in the NFL. And so it's all about putting the ball in the right place for that guy. Or even, I liken it to, there was a throw that Daniel Jones made, I think it was in week 2, where he threw the ball, it was to Alec Pierce, and Alec Pierce was, between the safety who was coming down on him and the corner who was behind him, and Daniel Jones threw it behind Alec Pierce and low to the ground. And Alec Pierce had to slide in order to catch it. But that slide, that low and away throw, the cornerback couldn't get to it. The safety couldn't get to it. It was in the perfect spot, and it prevented Alec Pierce from taking this big hit from the safety. So it's down in the way, right? It almost hits the ground. Pierce has to scoop it off the ground to make the catch, but it was actually a perfect throw for how you're supposed to do that. And then you've got the play a couple weeks ago where everybody's criticizing Brian Thomas Jr. for kind of giving up on the play, and it turns into an interception. He tips it into the air, protects his body, turns into an interception. But at the same time, it's a hospital ball. It's something that was thrown late with bad placement, and that's kind of where Trevor Lawrence has been so far this year. So against the 49ers defense, this looks really good. I do have questions about how well the Jaguars can do here, not in terms of they're only going to score 13 points or something, but can they turn this into a game environment that the pieces in this game have the potential to produce, where you have Ricky Pearsall, you have Christian McCaffrey, you have Brian Thomas Jr., you have all these weapons. It could be a shootout, but can it happen with Trevor Lawrence under center? And then we've seen the Jags defense look really good this year. But let's step on the brakes a little bit. Let's mention that they have faced Bryce Young, Jake Browning for most of that game, and then this completely broken Texans offense that quite genuinely is probably the worst offense in the NFL to this point in the season. Not to say they can't turn it around because they do have talent, but they have been the worst offense in the NFL to this point in the season, not because of the defenses they've been playing, but because of how poorly they have been playing. And so I think that the jury's still out on this Jags defense. Well schemed with Anthony Campanelli. They've got a good pass rush or good pieces for the pass rush with Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen. But I think this is a spot where the 49ers can do well on offense. And so then the question becomes, can the Jags keep it competitive in order for this to be like a real back and forth type game where instead of both teams scoring in the 20s, which is likeliest, we could see both teams scoring in the 30s. So I think that the Jags have to really find something in this week for it to turn into that type of game, but it is an interesting game environment to be thinking about. Then we have the Ravens and Chiefs. So this one's great. The way I see this game is Ravens are 1-2. Chiefs are 1-2. Chiefs also play, not that they're looking ahead, but the Chiefs also play the Lions in a couple of weeks before they get Rashee Rice back. If they lose this, they're 1-3. I forget who they're playing in week 4 or week 5, but they can win that game. And then they're 2-3, and then they got to play the Lions, right? All of a sudden, you might be 2-4 before you get Rashee Rice back. You're pretty far behind the 8 ball in that regard. Now, the Ravens are still the betting favorites to win the AFC North. Obviously, the Bengals are without Joe Burrow. The Browns are the Browns. And then the Steelers have not looked right so far this season. Almost lost to a Jets team that doesn't look good. Should have gotten waxed by the Patriots, except that the Patriots fumbled 4 times, gave away 4 fumbles, in fact, and had an end zone interception on a tipped pass. And so the Patriots outplayed the 49 or the Steelers pretty significantly there. So the Ravens are in better shape than the Chiefs. If they lose this game, they could be 1-3 and still be in better shape. But again, both of these teams are going to come into the saying, we need this win, treating it like a playoff game. So Mahomes has talked this season about how he usually waits until late in the season or the playoffs to really put his body on the line. So we've seen him twice this season that I can recall trucking defensive backs on the sideline where he could just step out of bounds, but he lowers his shoulder and knocks a guy over and then steps out of bounds, right? That's unnecessary. You don't have to subject your body to that, but you're sending a message to your team. You're sending a message to the opponent when you do that you are here to fight and you're not somebody to be messed with, right? Football is, again, as we've been talking about this season, it's not just the game on the scoreboard, it's also a battle of wills. And Mahomes is trying to do everything he can in that regard. Mahomes has also been running more than he typically does at this point in the season, taking more onto his shoulders to basically say, yeah, typically I save this higher variance and higher bodily risk stuff for January when we really need it. But he has said publicly, I feel like we need it now. And that's why he's doing that at this point. Well, now we've got a game against the Ravens who have not looked good on defense. And the Chiefs can't run the ball. So just thinking about how these two teams try to win, it makes all the sense in the world for the Chiefs to say, all right, Pat, try to put on the Superman cape, see if you can win this game for us. We'll give you all the help that we can. Looks like Xavier Worthy is going to be back this week. Questions on how much he'll play, what that means, obviously. But this is a spot where we should expect the Chiefs to put the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands and let him win it. That swings over to the Ravens side where Lamar Jackson is probably going to have that same mindset of trying to take over this game, a game that they absolutely need, and he's going to do everything he can in order to make sure that he can win this game for his team. And so I think that this is a game that we could see higher scoring in this spot. I mentioned in my journal and Discord earlier in the week, but we had a lot of excitement around the DFS space, the fantasy space, around what this offense might look like with Xavier Worthy. And now he's back, and everybody's going to be so concerned with the pitch count and all that I don't think we're going to see a lot of Worthy rosters this week. Looks like Mahomes, surprisingly, is tracking for some ownership this week. He has not been high owned for ages, and on the 1 week where I'm kind of on him from this standpoint of how they're likely to play this game, turned out that people are also getting on to him this week. So we'll see about that. We'll see how people end up playing Patrick Mahomes, but I think that this game becomes very interesting this week. And then we have the Colts and Rams. Highest total game. We have two good defenses, but two offenses playing really well. And I will always, when you have two good offenses against two good defenses, I will always bet on the offenses coming out ahead because the offenses have the advantage in the NFL. So when we have a bad offense going against a bad defense, that's a mistake the DFS players can make, is saying, well, shoot, this defense is so bad. This is a spot where this offense with cheap pieces can actually do well, but usually a bad offense is bad because they are bad, not because they're getting stopped consistently. A good offense is good because they can always figure things out. They can hit those tight window throws. They can set up third and short. They can convert those third and short. They can go for it on fourth down when they need to. They can convert in the red zone. So I like this game to be a game that ends up having scoring. I'm trying to catch up on Fridays, kind of when news is rolling in. So trying to catch up on news here over on the side while doing a solo podcast. But looks like Davante Adams feels good about being able to go this week. So what I like about the Rams is that it's concentrated. If they're doing well, we know where the touches are going. On the Colts side, not concentrated, but low price tags. So if you get it right, you're in great shape. And so really fun game to play around with. You could actually avoid the quarterbacks in this and stack up pieces. You could have, Xavier and Hilo talked about this last week. You could have Puka and Davante Adams with no Stafford. And it actually mathematically makes sense. You don't have to do that, but point being, you can play Puka or Davante. You could put Kyron Williams onto a Puka or Davante roster and say the Rams score points in this game and not have Stafford. Now, Daniel Jones, probably a little bit more viable to put him in if you're putting in these Colts pieces, but you don't have to. You could definitely have a Jonathan Taylor and Tyler Warren. You could have an A.D. Mitchell and Tyler Warren because they're both cheap, and it wouldn't require Daniel Jones having a big game in order for them to hit. And that still frees you up to go to Caleb Williams or Patrick Mahomes or whoever else you're wanting to go to from an upside perspective. And so lots of fun things that we can do with this game. For me, I would imagine that I will have minimum, so let's say I end up building 9 rosters this week for single entry 3 max. I will have at minimum one player from this game on every single roster is my expectation. And that might be one player from the Rams on every roster because I do think there will be scoring here. We know where the touches are going on the Rams. And then I'll have to figure out, hey, do I also want one piece from the Colts on every roster? Or at least will I have a lot of Colts on these rosters? And then at least 1 or 2 rosters where I'm stacking up this game. So a game that I like, a game where I expect that we'll see points, 2 really good offenses going at it because this is a huge game for them, right? If the Colts can go 4-0, that's massive. If the Rams can get back to 3-1 in their division with how tough that division is with Seattle, with the 49ers, even with the Cardinals playing well, that would be huge for them. And so, I really like this game to be similar to the Chiefs and Ravens where it's like, you got to win this game. And how are you going to do it? You're going to try to score points. You are going to be aggressive on fourth down. You're going to recognize that we need to that's what's killing me. One of the things among 50 others, but one of the things killing you about the Texans is, 4th and 1 from the 50-yard line. You're like, all right, let's punt it, right? Like we're not seeing a lot of that in this year's NFL, right? We have evolved in the NFL. And so when you have these teams that are not going for it on 4th and shorts, well, then your chance of that team putting up tournament winners is so much lower than these teams that are willing to be aggressive. And in these game environments where you have teams like the Colts and the Rams and teams that are willing to be aggressive, we should see that, right? We should see this mindset of, hey, we got to score points on this drive because that's how we expect this game to play out. And so we like that for DFS. And then we got the Bears and Raiders. So lower implied totals, but it's because they're both implied for 23.75. So one of the higher totals on the slate and expected to be a competitive game. And we've had a good read on this Bears setup over the last couple of weeks. So a couple of weeks ago, I spent a lot of time talking about how I really liked the Lions offense against the Bears, not from a matchup standpoint, but from a standpoint of understanding these teams, understanding that, again, from this component of football not just being about the score on the scoreboard, but also about the battle of wills on the field. And that's a huge part of, there's some teams, the Bucks, the Ravens, the 49ers, the Eagles, the Lions, that winning that battle of wills is a huge part of their MO, a huge part of their ethos as a football team. And so that really comes to the forefront when you have a divisional matchup, when you have, let's take the Bengals, right? One of the most reactive offenses in the NFL. They don't tend to be aggressive unless they're in a game environment that's pushing them to be aggressive. And then in 2021, I believe it was, they had these 2 games against the Ravens. So that was the year, if I remember this correctly, that was the year that they went to the Super Bowl. And they had 2 games against the Ravens that year where they just put up a ton of points without the Ravens responding, right? And it was the Bengals, against all odds, given the way that they typically approach games, it was the Bengals saying, we are going to exert dominance over the AFC North. We're going to show the Ravens, the kings of this division, that we are here, we're serious, and if we get a lead, we're going to keep the foot on the gas and put up as many points as we can. Well, we couldn't see those one. Well, I think we saw it coming the second time around there, but like some of those are harder to see coming, but there's certain teams that you know that that's their mindset. You know that that's how they're approaching things. And so when we had the Lions going against the Bears a couple weeks ago, coming off the loss to the Packers, going against Ben Johnson, who left them to go in division. And I don't think there's a ton of animosity there, but you know that they want to show Ben Johnson like, hey, we're still the kings of the North here. And so it made all the sense in the world for the Lions to, what I kept saying that week was if they get their foot on the Bears' neck, they're going to keep it there. They're going to stay aggressive. They're going to try to score as many points as they can. And it came down to them 4th and goal, up 3 scores from the 5-yard line. They went for it to get another touchdown in that game. And that was the mindset we were able to see that coming, right? Last week, well, Ben Johnson is part of that type of mindset, right? Ben Johnson he's not a friendly dude, right? To his players. He's a gritty guy. He pushes his players to be excellent. He's not one of these fatherly figures or bros with the players, or even like the friendly high energy guy like a Sean McVay. Like Ben Johnson is kind of that militaristic type of coach, but he's able to do it in such a way that he gets buy-in from his players. They recognize the success that he's had, and he's able to relate to these players better than, say, a Josh McDaniels, and get these guys to fall in line and say, look, if we can continue to do this, we will be on this championship path. We will continue improving. And so similarly, like Ben Johnson's got that mindset of, hey, if we can get our foot on their neck, like we want to keep it there. We want to show that we can score points. And so we saw that last week against the Cowboys. It was very comfortable and confident to say that Caleb Williams was the top quarterback option on the slate last week. I spent all week last week saying, if we're looking at other quarterbacks, we're comparing them to Caleb Williams and saying, if Caleb Williams disappoints, can this guy be the guy? Or if Caleb Williams just has a solid game, can this guy be the guy, right? So for me, it was like 35% of my rosters last week were Caleb Williams. I think 45% of my bankroll was on Caleb Williams. And it was basically saying, I think Caleb hits. If he doesn't, then like let me mix and match all the other things that might hit instead. Caleb Williams ended up being the QB1 last week, and so that was kind of the way to go at these low price tags. And so again, this is not the Cowboys. The Raiders are better than the Cowboys on defense, but it's still not a scary defense. And so this is a spot where I think that the Bears can do well on offense. They look like they're about 85% of the way there. They're not all the way there yet. It's not totally clicking, but Caleb Williams, and I always say, right, being a great quarterback is not about the arm talent. It's not about the mobility. Being a great quarterback is about what's between the ears, right? Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, they didn't have, Manning had great arm talent, not tremendous, right? Not all-time great arm talent. Brady didn't have anywhere close to all-time great arm talent. Neither of them had mobility, right? 2 of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And that's because of their understanding of the game. So we get these guys like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, who are among the best pocket passers in the NFL, but also have that mobility, and it just takes it to another level. Caleb Williams has the tools to be one of the best pocket passers in the NFL, physical tools. One of the best pocket passers in the NFL, to be this great mobile quarterback. And then on top of that, Ben Johnson has the know-how to build an offense that can enable Caleb Williams to be great between the ears and coach him up on that. And so we're seeing that starting to come forward. And I think we want to be early on Caleb Williams instead of being late. So I don't think last week's a fluke. I think we're going to keep seeing big games. There might be some dips. There might be some roller coasters to a season, but Caleb Williams is the guy that we can continue kind of going back to this season. And then the Raiders, like we know, they're capable of putting up points. We know they're capable of being inconsistent, but Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers, Ashton Ginty, if you're a believer at this point in the season. And then, last week I had some Geno stacks with Dante Thornton, ended up going to Trey Tucker instead, but they're going to have these downfield throws to these guys. And so very interesting game to think about there. A couple other interesting spots. Patriots implied to score 24 points. I was surprised when I flipped over the cards on projected ownership this morning and saw Drake May currently projected as the highest owned quarterback, but definitely a guy, like he was a guy I was talking about in my journal on Discord earlier in the week as like almost thinking I had to convince readers like, hey, this is a good play. This is actually a really good play here. And it turned out like everybody's on this play. But the Panthers better against the pass than they are against the run, and teams tend to then run the ball against them. So kind of hard to figure out a stacking partner for Drake May, but I certainly think that he is capable of putting up a nice game here. And then the Eagles against the Bucs. You could throw the Bucs in there as well, obviously, but an Eagles team that it's an interesting spot because they had to get aggressive against the Rams last week, and we saw the success. And the A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts both talked after the game about wanting to click into that aggressiveness earlier in games and more consistently. And now they're playing a Bucs team that's really hard to run against, that has a good offense, that's aggressive themselves, that the Eagles have had struggles with over recent years. And so I think this is a spot where we can see the Eagles open things up earlier and be throwing the ball. And so another interesting angle to think about this week. Some running back extras, kind of touched on James Cook already, but just getting more touches, and he's in a good spot game environment-wise for him to have that upside this week. Cam Scatterbo, is a tremendous pass catcher. He's tremendous in open space, and he's going to be the main running back for the Giants this week. So the matchup isn't great, but the price tag is there, and I think that the opportunity is there for him to have a strong game. So I'm very much on board. Obviously, he's going to be owned this week, but I'm very much on board with this one. So again, trying to catch up on news as I am talking, right, which is kind of hard. I'm not a great multitasker, so talking and reading at the same time. But there is this report from this morning that Patriots coach Mike Vrabel on Roto World said Ramondre Stevenson won't see a playing time cut for his fumbles in week 4. So this next one, I don't know, buy what Vrabel is selling with a grain of salt. I kind of think that the Patriots will lead off this game with TreVeyon Henderson. I think that they will give him a first crack at touches. I think that they will continue to rotate backs, but if TreVeyon Henderson is able to seize that role at the start of the game, if he is able to hit some big plays and look really good, I think this is a spot where we could see those 18 to 22 touches for TreVeyon Henderson, and he ends up being a tournament winner because nobody's going to feel comfortable playing him. So there's going to be some people taking those shots, but it's going to be 2%, 3%, something like that. He was projected at 3.2% before this note from Mike Vrabel, and so certainly think that this is a spot where TreVeyon Henderson, does he hit, if we play out this slate 100 times, does he hit like 20% of the time? No, but he hits often enough that there's positive expected value in this play. So another running back I wanted to throw out there. Some wide receiver extras that I just wanted to touch on here. Again, we'll go deeper into things in the player grid, but A.J. Brown, like I said, I think that the Eagles will get a little bit more aggressive early here. And just the math on A.J. Brown is interesting. People don't like to play him because when he misses for low scores. But we're trying to win tournaments. So we should be more worried about how frequently a guy hits to the upside and how high that ceiling can be. So we always say that generally speaking, DraftKings prices players in such a way that they'll generally hit 4x their salary 20 to 25% of the time. And sometimes it's a guy who's like priced in a place where he's going to hit 4x his salary 15%, 18% of the time. But the reason he's priced where he's priced is because when he hits, he can hit big, like a Deebo Samuel, right? Where with the 49ers, where it's going to be a lot of like 7-point games, 5-point games, 11-point games, but then maybe a 38-pointer in there. So you can't price him down as a guy who is typically scoring 12 to 15 points because he's also capable of scoring 30 plus. And then you've got the guys who, like the Keenan Allens back in the day or whoever it might be, where it's like they almost never hit 4x, but they're always at 3x. So there's some safety there, and every once in a while they can pop up getting close to that 4x salary mark. A.J. Brown he has hit for going back to the start of last season, he has hit 4x or better his salary this week in over 31% of his games. So that's tremendous value. And then typically a guy like that, it'd be a guy who is like, okay, but he never gets above that 4x mark. But we know A.J. Brown's capable of putting up a 35-pointer, a 40-pointer. And so it's just a really nice blend where if you can stomach the downside, recognizing like, yeah, A.J. Brown might score 7 points. What's the big difference between him scoring 7 points and some other running back, some other wide receiver in his price range scoring 12, 13, 14? The guy who scores 12, 13, 14, you might still cash with that guy in your roster. You might still double your money, but we're trying to win tournaments. That's how we make money over time in DFS, is winning tournaments. And so that guy who's also underwhelming, but just not underwhelming as badly, well, you're still probably not winning a tournament with him, right? And so the fact that A.J. Brown hits that tournament winning pace more often than basically anybody else priced around him, I think he's a very interesting play this week in a game where we could see tough to run on the Bucs. Bucs are aggressive. Bucs are good on offense. Eagles players talked about wanting to be more aggressive early in the game. So a lot of things line up there for A.J. Brown. And then healthy 49er wide receiver here. So if Jawan Jennings plays, he gets the targets, right? And then Pearsall has the upside, but also a lower floor because he's not piling. He's not getting double-digit targets more than likely with Jawan Jennings out there. So then Jawan Jennings becomes very interesting in this spot because the volume should be there, and I think that they can do well against this Jags defense. On the flip side, if Jawan Jennings ends up missing this week, I think Pearsall is a very interesting play because he has the big play upside, but then the volume will also be there. And he's basically, I think I said earlier today, if Jawan Jennings misses, Pearsall is basically like a 7K wide receiver on DraftKings in terms of where he should be priced for this particular situation. And he's not priced there. He's priced at 5,700. So really nice value there. I made a note. Tight end extras said, don't forget that Bowers is on this slate. And then, I made these notes kind of this morning while I was making breakfast and getting ready for the day and prepare the Angles podcast at that point. And then right before my show with Pete, I flip over the cards on ownership and see Brock Bowers is predicted to be the highest owned tight end. Not surprising, right? There's not a lot to like at tight end, but I had been building throughout the week and kind of down in that Tyler Warren tier. And it's just because of Brock Bowers, the knee injury that clearly hobbled him 2 weeks ago. And then last week, it was like, well, it seems like he's healthy, but maybe not. And maybe people won't play him because they're waiting for clarity, and you play him and he gets sub 10 points again. And so I was just kind of, falling into that trap of building with Tyler Warren and below this week. And not to say that that's going to be the wrong way to build, but then I built a practice build last night and tight end was my last position and I had 6,100 left over. And it was the first time where I was like, who's up here at 6,100? And it was, oh my gosh, Brock Bowers is here at 5,800. Tremendous play this week. And so we're obviously still question marks about the health, but if he's healthy, this is a great spot where we expect the Bears to do well against this defense. And we don't think that the Raiders will have a hard time against the Bears defense. Dennis Allen is starting to get this kind of shaped up a little bit, but what Dennis Allen does well is he makes it difficult for the offense to understand what's going on. And that's something that Geno Smith is pretty good at. And so the Raiders are likelier to stop themselves than they are to be stopped by the Bears. And so if they're able to get away with not stopping themselves, Bowers has that upside on this slate. So I guess more of a note for me than for you. Don't forget that Bowers is on this slate, since it seems like people are not forgetting that he's on this slate. But yeah, I think that he's a very sharp way to go as well. All right, so we are going to wrap this up with a bottom-up build, and then we will get out of here. Bottom-up build, for those of you unfamiliar with this, build with a 44K salary cap on DraftKings. So it's a great thought exercise. Helps us to poke around on some values, but also to think about how we would win a 44K salary cap tournament in terms of how we're putting things together, how we're hunting for upside, how we're doing things a little bit differently than the field. And then we have a 44K salary cap contest that's free to enter, a $100 prize to first place. You got to be using the OWS pennant as your avatar in order to win, be eligible to win. But you can get $100 first place, or if you're not an Inner Circle member, it's a $229 subscription. You can get that for free. If you're an Inner Circle member, but you don't have access to the Bink machine, the optimizer, you can get that for free. So you can pick what you want in that regard for winning this free contest. And the rules are simple. Build with the 44K salary cap or lower. And it's just a really cool way to kind of rewire your brain, force yourself to think a little bit differently, and maybe see some new things on the slate. So for me, the 44K, I think I spent 43.8K, 6,200 left over on this roster. And I started out this roster with Amari and Hampton at running back because I'm fine taking this value here. Now, in a 44K salary cap contest, you could recognize just strategically, just talking like how we would carry this over to the main slate, this type of thinking, but recognize that in a 44K salary cap contest, a lot of rosters are going to start with Amari and Hampton. So you can ask yourself, how do I get up to James Cook? How do I get up to Kyron Williams? How do I do something different at the running back position? But I wanted to go ahead and throw Amari and Hampton onto this roster. And then I also threw in Adonai Mitchell, who I'll get deeper into him in the player grid, but I really like him this week at only 3,100. And on a bottom-up build, it's an easy way to start to see, like, okay, what salary flexibility do we have here? I decided to go with a Bears stack in this spot. So that's Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, and then last I saw, Colston Loveland is not expected to play this week. So Cole Kmet's a really nice piece to throw in here on this build. Only 3K, and again, lowers our salary and allows us to do more elsewhere. And if you're building with a 50K salary cap, you can pull something like this and then just have tons of flexibility in other spots. And if Bowers and Tyler Warren both kind of finish in like the 15-point range, the 12-point range, whatever it might be, you have a shot to get 8, 10, 12 points from Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet is capable of putting up a 20-pointer. It's unlikely, but he's capable of it. And so you can really keep an analysis for higher upside plays than those Tyler Warren or Brock Bauer rosters are getting. And so I like this as kind of a sneaky way to stack this game, save some salary, do something different on a roster, and then obviously works well with a 44K salary cap here. So again, Amari and Hampton, a Caleb Williams, Cole Kmet, Rome Odunze stack. I threw in Jacoby Myers as my bring back here because I do want to bet on the Raiders side if I'm stacking at this Caleb side on most of these Caleb Williams rosters. And if I'm building 9 rosters, if I have, I don't know, let's say that I had 5 Caleb Williams rosters. I don't know that I would have 5 out of 9 because there's some other spots I like as well. But I would probably have like 2 Brock Bowers, 2 Jacoby Myers, maybe 1 Ashton Jeanty, even though I don't love the Ashton Jeanty play. If I'm betting on this game, I want to give myself an opportunity to benefit if it hits here. If I'm going 3 Caleb rosters, then I'll have a tougher decision to make in how I will be doing that this week. Or maybe I'll expand to like 14 rosters, and then I'll have the opportunity to build 5 Caleb rosters and feel a little bit better about how I'm allocating things this week. But through Jacoby Myers on this particular one. And so now we've got Caleb Williams. We have Amari and Hampton at running back. We get this full stack with Cole Kmet, Rome Odunze, and Jacoby Myers. We have AD Mitchell saving us some salary. Throwing the Texans defense, clearly the top defense play on this slate. Not much that needs to be talked about there. And then we have enough salary to go a couple guys in the 5K range or to go expensive running back. And so we could go James Cook and then go cheap at wide receiver. But what I went ahead and did was Kim Scadaboo because I really like having him and Amari and Hampton on a roster together. Typically, if you have 2 cheap running backs stepping into a starting role on the same week, ownership would flock there. A lot of times when people pay down at one running back spot, they don't like paying down at a second running back spot. They'll go 1 cheap running back and 1 higher price running back. That's what we see a lot in DFS. But if 2 cheap guys are stepping into lead roles on the same week, that double cheap running back build would become way more popular. But another thing people don't like doing is playing 2 running backs in the same game. And so even though clearly math-wise, if Amari Hampton is involved as the lead back, he's involved in the pass attack, involved in the ground, Cam Scadaboo is definitely going to be involved in the pass attack and on the ground. Like, it doesn't matter that they're in the same game together, but there's just like a logical hurdle to get over for a lot of people when they see 2 running backs in the same game on the same roster that they're building. It makes them not want to, that makes them not feel comfortable with it. And so we should get a little bit lower, like double pay down than we would get if these guys were in different games, lower double pay down than we would get if these guys were not playing against each other. And so kind of like the opportunity to get these guys on a roster together. And then I also threw Quentin Johnston on here. So it's kind of this like mini stack without Herbert, where you have betting on the Chargers doing well in this game, betting on Cam Scadaboo getting some carries, but obviously having to catch some passes as the Giants are trailing. And Quentin Johnston, who I'm not ready to like declare it yet, right? I've got my list that I've been talking through throughout the season of guys who are underpriced, where these guys are going to be priced deeper into the season. And, you know, I think generally we're trending toward Rome Odunze when he was 4,800. I think we said he'd be 6,500 before long. He's already up to 6,300, right? There's some other guys who haven't taken those climbs yet. Tetero and McMillan should get up over 7K by the end of the season. If Bryce Young can support him, definitely going to get up over 6,500. And so a lot of these guys, right, like they're pretty confident statements. Hey, this guy's underpriced based on where he's going to be deeper into the season. I can't make a confident statement on Quentin Johnston, but he looks different. And the Chargers appear to understand that he looks different, and they're using him as a guy who looks different. And it's not going to be surprising to me if he's 6,800 or more deeper into the season. And so I want to buy low on him while people are still not buying him quite yet. Quentin Johnston added to Amari and Hampton, betting on this offense, gives us a bottom-up build of Caleb Williams, Cole Kmet, Rome Odunze, Jacoby Myers in that Bears and Raiders game. Amari and Hampton, Cam Scadaboo, and Quentin Johnston in the Chargers and Giants game. AD Mitchell helping us save salary, and the Texans defense, I believe that was 43.8K in salary spent, leaving 6.2K remaining. With that, I'm going to get out of here. Next up for me, I will be recording Solo Ship with Squirrel Patrol. You can find that on the 1 Week Season YouTube feed, podcast feed, on the 4for4 YouTube feed and podcast feed. And then I will be working on the player grid the rest of this Friday evening. That'll go live around 8 p.m. Eastern on Friday. If you're an Inner Circle member, I'll have more thoughts Friday night, as I'll be starting to really start building rosters, done with practice builds and really building rosters on Friday nights. I'll have additional thoughts in my journal and Discord on Friday night, kind of bridge the gap between the player grid coming out and the late Saturday night, early Sunday morning update going into the player grid. And then I will be at the track all day on Saturday, but I literally don't know what time Williams' last race is going to be, or his night race or whatever. So I don't know if I'm getting home at 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, but I will not be doing MME. I will be working on single entry 3-max. I'll have the time to do it. I will surely drop a few more thoughts into Discord as I do that. And then, as always, you'll get my Sunday morning update in the player grid with kind of how I'm attacking the slate officially, that you'll see, usually around 2 a.m. on the West Coast, so 5 a.m. East Coast, you wake up, it'll be there. With that, I'll get out of here. I will see you on the site throughout the weekend, and I will see you at the top of the leaderboards on Sunday.